Hi, I'm Oliver Carlson, or CRM Chart Guy, and I got an Axel with me today here to help me out. And today we're going to be looking at a blog post I did a couple years ago, but how I would solve this same issue today. So back in 2015, I wrote this compare this year to last year with a dynamic CRM chart. That was back in there, it was called dynamic CRM. And it's this fairly long-winded road of creating a lot of Chart XML and Chart XML customizations to add a secondary x-axis to the chart and overlay the information so we can have this year versus last year mapped up against each other. Now, that was all the stuff that you had to do to get that chart inside Dynamics, which is interesting because in Excel or Power BI, this is fairly easy. But of course, we have a situation where we still want to do things directly within the model-driven app or Dynamics 365. And so I want to look at, on this video, look at how would I solve this today, because with a lot of the limitations coming out on charts on the unified interface, this won't actually work in the future once you upgrade to the unified interface. So let's have a look at what we'd actually do today to get this done. And what I'll try to do is create a chart that looks more like this. Now we can see we have January, February, etc., and we have each individual year mapped out, so we can see how are we performing month over month, or year over year on a given month. Now let's have a quick look at the underlying data for this, because what I did was that I created a table on entity in the model-driven app that has all of this information. So this is actually a table that just aggregates information for each year, what the month number is, what the year is, and what the actual revenue is for that given period. Then I have all of this data, and that's essentially what's being mapped on this table. How did I create this summarized table, aggregate table? Well, I used a new feature called Dataflows. So I'll put this link in here, how you create and use data flows, but I'll actually do this whole thing from scratch. So we can have a look and see how do we actually, and fairly easily, create this table and build a chart on it. So let's get started. I'll open up a new browser and go to make.powerapps.com. All right, and we'll start off by going to data flows. We can see a previous one here I have for my test run, but I'll go ahead and click on new data flows, and we'll call this one year. Go ahead and say create. All right, and here we see a lot of different data sources. Now, all of these data sources, in the beginning, this might look like Power BI. When you select your data source, and that's because CDS Dataflows are using Power Query to query all and transform all of the data from these different sources exactly the same way that Power BI does. It's the same process. So everything that you learned in Power BI, the desktop client, and Power Query in particular, you can basically repeat here in terms of grabbing, querying, transforming data, and inserting into CDS instead. Now, because we can do that, I can actually create my entire query string inside of the Power BI desktop client, which to me is a little bit easier. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and create a new Power BI report. So I already had Power BI open. I'll go ahead and say, click on Get Data and More Sources. And now I'll search for Dynamics 365 online, and I'll add here that I would, if I was creating a Power BI report or something else and getting the data into Power BI, I would never choose Dynamics 365 online as a source. I would select this source right here, the common data service instead. If you're doing Power BI and Power BI reports, use the common data service. However, the common data service is not available in the CDS Dataflows, so I'll use the OData connection or string via the Dynamics 365 online connector right here. All right, so I'll need the web API URL, and I'll just switch right back here, go to my advanced settings, go to customizations, developer resources, and pick up the web API string here. So I'll copy and paste that and copy it in here and click OK. All right, now all my tables are loaded. I'll find the opportunity table. There we go. And I'll go ahead and click on Transform Data. I'll open up the query editor and we can start making changes to all of the data here. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to get all the information that is actually relevant to me here. So I'll go ahead and say choose columns. I should say I only want to get the data that's relevant to me, because what I'm actually doing is I'm removing everything else that I don't want. And in this case, I want actual close date and actual value. I'll go ahead and say OK. So this is basically the information I'm interested in: when something was won and how much was won, in order to create that aggregate table. Now we need to add some additional information on this. For example, the actual close date by itself isn't good enough. I wanted to have something that said January, February, etc. So what I can do here is I can say add column and add custom column. And we'll call this one month name. And we'll enter the formula here. We'll say date dot month name. And that was from the actual close date. And there we go. So now we have the month name here. And we're just going to go ahead and do that again. And we'll just do the month number. And we'll say date dot month actual close date. And there we go. And of course, I also wanted the year for comparison purposes. So we'll do one last one. Call this one year. Say date. And just type it in, and we can use the type ahead here that I'm using. We'll put in the year. And then of course we want the field itself. All right, so now we're getting closer to what we need here. All right, and for good measure, I will just change the type here to text. This one I'll set as a whole number so I can sort on it. And the year I will leave as text. For the CDS Dataflow to work, I'm going to need some kind of unique key. So the one thing that's going to be unique between for every single record in the aggregate table that we're doing is the combination of year and month. So we'll go ahead and create that column. Create another custom column. And we'll call this one month year. And we'll basically say this is the month name. I say this is text. I'm just going to do a little dash in between. More text. And year. And there we go. And then we can go ahead and say this is also text, just to make sure we got that. All right. So now we need to basically group this so we get our total value per month per year. All right, so the fields I want to keep is month, year. And I'll hold out Control here while I select these. The year, the month name. And we're going to go ahead and say transform and group by. Got month name, year, number. And we are going to select a sum on the actual value. And we're going to call this one revenue. Let's just call it actual revenue. All right, there you go. And I'm just going to go ahead here and quickly remove all the empty records. So we only have records in our table that have the proper information. But now we actually have a value here, our table, with the name of the month, the number of the month, the year, the key that we generated, and the actual revenue for that individual month. All right, so far, so good. So now we just need to set up the CDS Dataflow, so that basically creates this table for us, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'll go to the advanced editor, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy the whole thing. We'll go back to the browser, and we'll go back to our CDS Dataflow that we started creating, and I'll click on blank query. I'm just going to copy and paste the whole thing in there and say next. And it's going to ask me, how do I want to connect? And I can actually just say connect because I'm within the same environment. So I'm already logged into my model-driven Power App. All right, so here we are. We can actually just, if we wanted to, rename the table year-over-year. And all of the transformations, everything that we did in the Power BI desktop client, it's not apparent here. I don't have to do anything here. As you can tell up here, I were able to add those additional columns, etc. I just personally think it's easier to work in the desktop client, even though I'll have to admit for a web client, the interface here is pretty good, but I just like the desktop client. All right, we'll go ahead and click next. All right, and now I can select what I want to do. If I want to load this to an existing entity, a new entity. Now, I've been lazy, so actually I have not even created an entity in advance. I'll just say load to new entity. And we need to make some decisions here. The entity name is called year-over-year, display name, etc. We'll just leave it at that. I can add a description too. And I can select a key field, or what would be the key. And I selected that as the month year item. So that's kind of the primary field that we're using. And that is, of course, a text field. So what I'm doing here with the text field is I have to define as whether or not that is a text field or multi-line text. I'm just want to make sure I go through this. The rest of the items, it actually grabbed by itself. We have the month number as a whole number, floating point number, that's the decimal for the actual value. All right, so we are good now. So I'll go ahead and say next. And we'll say refresh manually for now. We'll go ahead and say create. All right, so now it's going to go ahead and create the entity. And better than that, it's going to query the data and insert all the data after the transformations into that table that we have. So we'll let it run through this, and then we're going to go look at the data itself. All right, now it's complete. I'm probably going to fast forward that on video, but that took about a minute, so it wasn't a whole lot. So we'll click done. So now we have this year-over-year item. So I'll go back to my Power App here. This view here, and we can see that we have all the data we're looking for. We have the actual revenue. Hindsight, I should probably have formatted this as currency instead of a value, but we'll just leave it at that for now. All right, I have the month name, I have the month number, and I have the year. So now I actually just go ahead and create a chart. So I'll click on show chart. There are no charts yet, so we'll actually just go ahead and create one. All right, so we'll go ahead and select the field. So we're actually going to, obviously we're going to sum on the actual revenue, and we're going to break this down by the month name, and we're going to add a category here. So we are going to add the, where is it? The year. There we go. And call this one Y-O-Y chart. Save and close. All right, so there we have the chart. And let me see about now. This doesn't look too nice here. That's definitely some things I still want to clean up. Now the values here: 14 million, 12 million, 10 million, etc. That can be a little hard to read with all those values, so I want to scale this down. Also want to shorten these values here, so they maybe say like 12.6 million instead of like the whole thing with 2 decimals. And in particular, the order down here, the month are alphabetical: April, August, December, February, etc. So that can be a little confusing to read, and that of course wasn't the whole point, which is why I added the month number in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up the XrmToolBox and connect to this specific environment, and then just make a few changes in here. Here I have my XrmToolBox. I'm going to connect to my environment that I'm currently in, and I am going to open up the advanced chart editor. Here, let me just search for it, chart editor, which is created by my friend Mohammed Rashid and myself. All right, so we'll open this up, we'll load entities, and we'll go ahead and find the year over year that we're working with, and there's the year over year user chart that I just created, and we'll go ahead and say edit. And the first thing I want to do here is, I'm gonna have to remember how to do this, but I want to create and make sure that we get the order correct, right? Because we have the month items are basically sorted by alphabetically by the month name and not the month number. So we'll add the attribute name equals, and I'm just going to copy and paste that month name, and we just called it month with or without the number on there. We called it month number. All right. There you go. And we'll have an aggregate. We have to have an aggregate in order to put it in here. Aggregate equals sum. We're actually not going to display this anywhere. We just need it in there. We'll put in an alias, and we'll call that month order. There we go. And we'll end the tag, and we'll put in a new one. Order alias equals month order descending equals false. So I know a little of this from another blog post I made called ordering or sorting your charts. I'll leave a link to that in the video in case you need it, because I would say this is probably the most not intuitive thing of the whole video that I'm doing. So alias month order descending equals false, and looks like I need to put an equal sign in there. So I'll go ahead and say update. So now it's updating the chart, right? The chart's actually been updated, it's a user chart. So I can just come back in here and click refresh. And that didn't do anything. All right, I just needed to do an extra refresh for the whole browser. So I got the new chart code in there, and there we are. So now we have January, February, March, etc. Everything is sorted properly. So let me just open up the toolbox again here and the chart editor, and I'll click on Open Visual Editor. And here I'll go into the series, click on the series, and I'm going to go in and find the label. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on here. So the series is actually what's showing the values on top of the individual columns. We'll go in here and we'll actually just set that as millions. And go ahead and say save. And we can actually do the same thing for the axis. So we go into the axis itself, and we want to do this on the y-axis, label style. And we have the format there. We'll do the same million setting. Go ahead and say save. And for fun, we can come up here. Maybe we'll just change out that old color scheme to the unified, the original unified interface color scheme. Go ahead and say OK. And we'll say update. And we'll go ahead and click refresh in the browser. And we'll show the chart again. All right, and now we have all the new values. All right, and then we can see the new chart here. So now we actually have these month over month where we can see January, February, how we compare to all of the previous years here. Now, one thing you're probably gonna say, so how is this gonna update, right? Because yeah, I did an aggregated table. It's kind of like taking out Excel. And you know, I would need to go back in and reload all this data. But this is where Dataflow actually can help us out quite a bit. Now, so what I can do here is come back to our year over year and say edit. And what I want to do here is set up a cadence. And the reason I want to do some edits is because I don't necessarily want to do everything here in one step, because what I'm doing is I'm basically reloading the entire table every single time. But for example, there's no reason for me to recalculate January 2016 every single time I run this process here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go back a couple steps. Here I'll select the remove other columns. So now I'm actually back here where I only have 2 columns, the actual close date. And I'm actually just going to add a filter. I'm going to add a date filter. And we can actually do the month. And we'll go ahead and say this month only. Insert. See here, and we actually have a few opportunities. So right here, so now I added the filter. We'll go back to the very end, and we can now see that we only have January. So now, when I set up the cadence, I'm only going to load the last month every single time. Faster, easier processing, etc. Just good practice. And notice here, we're already set to update this one, the year over year entity. And everything is already mapped because we did this previously. So what I'll do here is I'll click next, and I'll get to the cadence, the frequency that I want to do. So I'll set this to refresh automatically. You know what? I'm just going to say I'm going to refresh this every single minute. Can it do that? Yes. Yes, it can. So we'll actually just go ahead, and I'm actually just going to select timestamp here. That was a little while ago. It's fine. I just want to make sure it keeps running. It doesn't necessarily wait 25 minutes until it starts running. This is all UTC time, by the way. So go ahead and say create. So now it's going to re-verify everything, and then it's going to start the cadence and start running. So we're just going to give it a minute here to set up and do its run again. And then we'll do a quick test. We'll go ahead and create an opportunity and see the value change. All right, so that's completed now, and it is running in the background. So what I'll do here is we'll go back to the dashboard, and we'll go ahead and now what I'll do is I'll quickly create an opportunity. Which means that now in less than a minute, this one should go from 7.65 to 10.65. So in this case, we can actually just hit refresh and see when it happens. All right, and this, I'll probably fast forward on the video. And there we go. 10.65. So now it's been updated. So we can see that actually happened fairly quickly. And we can go back to our settings here on the run and actually just look at the refresh history. All right, so now we can see how it's running. So we can actually see the initial run here had 49 records, and the previous one only have 1 month because we are only doing the current month and we're doing it every single minute. So it will always be up to date. So a couple of things here when we're doing this, and we're doing this every minute. Yeah, you definitely do not want to audit your change table. It's basically going to blow up your audit log, and it's going to be a mess, and you're going to have to pay for extra log capacity, etc. So don't do that. Just make sure that everything is good there. And of course, make sure you add those filters so you're only processing records that you actually need. But now we actually have this continually updated aggregate table, so we can do this year over year comparison and also have those views ready. Sometimes you want to display as a table instead, and it's going to be all good. All right, thanks for watching, And thanks to little Axel here for sleeping most of the time. It's very helpful. Don't forget to subscribe. I hope to put out a lot more videos. I've been working a lot with CDS recently and the CDS Dataflows recently. Quite an amazing feature, so I want to see what else we can do. And if there are any other previous chart customizations that we need to have a look at and see how would I do this today. Thank you.